Hey there, it's Cassie. Welcome back for part 2 of my two-part series that I'm calling Let's Make 8, and this one is featuring the September 2018 My Monthly Hero Kit. So let's go ahead and get started with card number 1, or I guess in this case it's card number 5. So if you've missed part 1, go ahead and head back to my channel and you'll see the first 4 cards, but this video is going to have the last 4 cards. So this one, what I'm doing here is I am taping down some Strathmore 140-pound watercolor paper, and I'm just doing that with some washi tape. And I didn't do it on all 4 sides because it really wasn't necessary. All the water that I'm putting down, I'm putting just in that left-hand corner. And I have a Simply Simmons number 8 round brush that I have dipped in water, and I am using that dot chart that came in the kit that has all those Daniel Smith colors, and I'm just slapping some color down. And I really don't care that the green and the red are going to cause some brown because, well, I'm making a fall card. So I'm heat setting that, and then I'm going to put some more water down, and I am going to try and make those colors a little bit more vibrant because, as we all know, watercolor tends to dry back. So it might seem very vibrant at the start, but then it will kind of, it'll dry back a little bit. And at least it is in this case. But these Daniel Smith watercolors are fabulous. Oh, and there's a lot on this dot chart. I think Hero Arts did a fantastic job of really filling you up with some of those colors. They are super pretty, and after all the cards I made, I still have quite a bit of color left on that dot chart. So I'm heat setting that one more time. And then I'm thinking I'm going to do some splatters. I want to do some brown splatters. If you notice, I didn't use any of the brown. So I'm trying to use my number 4 silver brush, and I think I didn't get enough water on there, so I'm like, all right, let's try again. And I just, for whatever reason, was having a heck of a time getting some splatters onto this card, but I eventually did, and it was subtle, and at the end of the day, I think I really like the way that look came about. So I will peel off that washi tape, and then I will heat set that one more time just to make sure that those little splatters are all dry. And then I'll get out my stamps. So I'm going to use my sentiment that says "You are vibrant," and I'm stamping that with VersaFine Onyx Black ink because that'll be good and vibrant. And now I'm going to stamp the leaf all across that corner, just kind of turning it as I go. And this ends up being so super simple, but I love the impact of those watercolors along with that stamping. So I have a piece of Neenah cardstock that I am scoring at 5.5 inches, and that was originally 5.5 inches, or 4.25 inches by 11 inches, so it is a top folding A2 size card. And I'm using my Tombow permanent adhesive to adhere that to the front of that panel, or that card base. And then I'm going to grab some Nuvo crystal drops. In this case, I am going to be using Bottle Green, Auburn Pearl, and Autumn Red. And you're going to see a lot of these because they're gorgeous. And if I'm making fall cards, I'm going to reach for these a lot. So I'm going to splatter those all over the front. And I'm checking them before I go because more often than not, if I don't check them, I end up having to scrape it off. So it's just better for me to just test it out first before I just go right in for the squeeze. And then when I'm done with that one, that'll finish that part off. So I will try and tap the back here. I'm flicking the back. I've noticed that if I flick the back rather than tapping, the enamel dots will look more like enamel dots. They will flatten out a little bit better. And so once I'm done with that, that'll finish off card number 5. For card number 6, I am going to do some more watercoloring, but first I'm going to get most of the elements ready for my card. I had this idea in my head already, so it was pretty easy to just kind of get like the panel made, where I scored that at 5.5 inches to make that a top folding A2 size card. And then I just trimmed down some of my patterned paper. And again, this patterned paper comes from that No Problema from Die Cuts with a View, and I'll have that linked down below. But I have a piece of Strathmore watercolor paper once again, and I'm going to stick that inside of my Mini Misty. And I am going to get my images all ready to go. Just line all those up, all the ones that I plan to use. There are so many great stamps in this set, and I don't know why in the 8 cards that I made I didn't use more of them, but I'm sure I'll use them in the future. So I am preparing my paper with my Anti-Static Embossing Buddy, and then I'm inking up my images with some Versamark ink, which is just a clear sticky ink, because I am going to use some gold embossing powder over the top of these images. I always love the way watercolor looks against the gold. I'm sure you've seen a bunch of people do something similar, and so I've seen it a lot here on YouTube, and so I thought I'll just give it a shot. So I'm heating that now. And that gold is an ultrafine gold from Simon Says Stamp. And then I twisted my paper and I'm going to stamp out my sentiment, because at first I thought I wanted it to be a long strip. And that sentiment just says thankful. And then I'll do the exact same thing with the embossing powder and heating it. And I've sped up my coloring about 4 times, but I am just coloring with that dot chart that came in the kit as well, once again. And I'm not doing anything very special because I'm letting the gold do most of the work. And with the embossing, that really helps because it keeps everything fairly contained. And you can move on to your next bits without worrying about it traveling into the next part. So, and I'm just deepening up that one side with a little bit of that green. You can use one color and get lots of depth with it. And then I'm using some red at the tips on all of them. And then I'm going to go back in with some yellow and kind of let those mix a little bit. I love how that works. It's kind of a fade in and it looks really pretty. And then I'll move on to that carmine color. And I will color the vase and the plate with that, leaving most of my darker shadowing at the very bottom and on the side of the vase and at the bottom of the plate. And then I'll heat set those after well, and here's where I discovered, and if I had looked at the dot sheet it would have said that that color is a staining color, so it's not coming up if you put water on it. Once it's down, it's down. So I have lined up all my coordinating dies and I've run that through my Big Shot machine, and then I'm pulling all those images out. And I've kind of got my scene ready to go. And for my sentiment, I ended up trimming it down and I'm putting some fishtail banners on each end. Pretty simple. I just wanted a little something extra. And then I'll start assembling. And so I'm using my tape runner to adhere all the images down. And I put that too high, and you'll see here in a bit. Because otherwise, with the way I have my vase and everything set up, the seed pods and everything are going to be coming off the top of that card. So instead of figuring that out just yet, I've grabbed my Copic color, which is the E42 in this case, and then I'll use the E43 to kind of darken that up and feather that out. And then I have a base so it doesn't just look like it's floating. And here's where I sort of discover, because I've taped these together, this is where I discover that it's just up a little too high. I have put foam tape on the back of everything, and yeah, I start to peel off all that foam tape. Well, maybe I haven't quite discovered it yet. I know, hindsight tells me that it was too high up, but I've peeled off all of my foam tape, and now I'm looking like, oh, wait a minute, that's not going to work. So here's where I pull it all up, and thankfully it didn't destroy any of the back of my panel there. So I just put a little bit more tape down to make sure, and then I'd lower it just a little bit so that I don't have to worry about my seed pod sticking off the top. And then I will adhere those flowering seed pods first on both sides, just lining it up with the vase, and then I will stick the vase down as well. These images are just adorable. I love them. And then I'll put my sentiment down. And then as a final bit of embellishment, I will grab some gold Nuvo drops, and I'll just sprinkle those on. I'm obviously obsessed with Nuvo drops at this point right now. They're great. And then I'll try to, once I'm done with that, kind of flick the back end of them. See if I can get those to flatten just a little bit. And when I'm done with that, that'll finish off card number 6. For card number 7, I am going to use those leaf notes, and I have some cardstock already cut, and I'm going to score this at 4 1/4, so this is a side folding A2 size card, and then I'm going to use those same pattern papers that I have in the past for my background, except this gold color that I have used for some other cards. So I'm just kind of sticking those notes down. I notice the one is not straight. And so I will stick all those down, and then I will use my tape runner to kind of make sure they're adhered pretty well on the sides and on the top. And then that panel is ready to go. And then I'm going to kind of get some ribbon ready. I want to use some of that ribbon that came in the kit. This will be the first and only time, unfortunately, that I use it. It's like I forget the ribbon's there. And back in the day, we used to use ribbon like crazy. So I'm just tying a bow in my hands, just manipulating it back and forth, back and forth. I know that's pretty fast, but it just takes practice. Anybody can do it. So I'm roughing up the edges as well. This is kind of old school. You can't see it, unfortunately. I did it off screen, not realizing I was doing it off screen. Sometimes I get the zone and that's that. But I'm roughing up those edges, and you'll kind of see it from here on out if you look closely. So to adhere that ribbon, I've just stuck a little bit of tape runner on the sides, on the back of where I want it, and then that's that. I'm going to adhere that down to my patterned paper panel. And this is once again from that Die Cuts with a View No Problema. And I'm just kind of making sure that's lined up correctly. And then I'll go ahead and tape that down to my card base. And then I will start working on my sentiment. But before I do that, I do have some Neenah Cream cardstock, and I'm just going to stick that on the inside of the card, so that way I don't have to worry about using a gel pen on the inside with that dark cardstock. And then I'll take that same cardstock, and I'm going to put that inside my Mini Misti so that I can stamp out my sentiment. And I'm using some Memento Espresso Truffle. And this stuff is great. So it's a really dark brown, almost black, but you can tell it's still brown. And I thought this would be perfect for the autumn color. And I love that. So I trim that down pretty good. And then I'm going to adhere that using some foam tape. Just trimming that. Can't see me doing it, but that's what I'm doing. I'm trimming some foam tape, and I'm going to start sticking that down. This ends up being a very simple card, but I couldn't stay away from those little translucent leaf notes. They're just so fun. And then I'll use my T ruler. Finally got one. I mean, they're so inexpensive. I don't know why I didn't get one sooner. And then just making sure that's lined up straight. And then I'll use some craft tacky glue to put my bow down. And I will put a stamp block on top of that for a little while, just to kind of make sure that it stays put and that it'll adhere very well. And then I use those same Auburn Pearl Nuvo drops once again. And that'll finish off card number 7. Super simple, folks. Super simple. For card number 8, I wanted to utilize that gorgeous window fancy die, and so I am going to make this another fairly simple card, but with these elements, you can do this. So I already trimmed down using some brown paper, but I'm keeping that centerpiece inside because I want to do some shading or some ink blending so that it gives some depth and some variation to the frame itself. So I'm using some gathered twigs right now, and I'm just and this is the Distress Oxidinks, and I'm using my mini ink blending tool all over the outside of it, and I'm kind of going on the inside, and by keeping that centerpiece in there, you give the frame more stability. And then I'm going to grab some Vintage Photo and do the exact same thing that I just did, just trying to add a little bit darker to it as well. And then when I'm happy with that, I'll do some ink splatters. So I like how that's turning out. And I'll use some black soot Distress Oxide with a little bit of water and a paintbrush and splatter that all over. Now for my background, I am using something that I got in a haul video, and this is called the Tim Holtz Aviary Collage Paper. It's basically tissue paper, but it comes in that giant roll. I'll never use it all, but and typically I would use it for some of my my mixed media, but I thought this would be really fun to use as a background for this card. So my card base is just some Neenah cardstock, and I've put tape runner all over the front of that cardstock, and I'm just going to basically start at the bottom and then roll that tissue paper down so that there aren't any bubbles. And then I'll flip that over and trim all the excess off. And then with that leftover paper from the center, I decided to cut my sentiment out of it. So I'm stamping that using some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Just stamping that right there in the center, and then I'll trim that down and give it a flag banner. And you didn't see me make these in this particular video, but I made those leaves in the first part. Those were all made in the first part, and I didn't end up using them, so I thought I would use them in this part. So I've got some adhesive here, some liquid adhesive, and I'm just putting that all over the outside of it, using it fairly sparingly, but you know, trying to make sure I've got some good coverage. And then I will put that down, and then I'm going to use some foam tape on all the rest of my elements. So my sentiment and my leaves are all going to have some foam tape on the back, and I'll stick that sentiment down, and then I will put those leaves all around it, and that will be the embellishments for the outside of this card. That collage paper on the back is so busy, you just don't need too much else. And then I have 3 extra leaves that I'm going to end up putting on the inside just using a tape runner. So I'll stick those down, and I'll even have them coming off the side, which is fine. And then, oh, and there's my cat saying hello to everybody. And then I'll trim off the excess. And when I'm done with that, that'll finish off card number 8. So let's go ahead, when we're done here, take a look at the last 4 cards in the series. And like I said before, if you missed part 1, go back to my channel and check it out so that you see the first 4 cards. But I would love to know which one of these last 4 cards is your favorite. And that's probably my favorite part of making these, is just knowing which ones you guys like the best. And then, as always, guys, I always appreciate you stopping by. And if you like this video, hit the like button. Thanks.